morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Thursday. Love the new hair, Briahna. Looks great.
Oh, thank you. Long overdue post-COVID trim.
Well, I have an update for the viewers because I know they were really concerned about my missing scooters that I haven't been able to find in D.C. No, I found out what's wrong.
What's going on?
The city, this is going to make me very upset. The city rescinded Bird's approval to operate in the city. There's space for 5 scooter companies, and they only approved 4 of them. And they said Bird, even though it was like only 1 point behind on the metrics, I don't know, like quality, sustainability, some nonsense, they kicked them all out. So I am livid. And in fact, there was a local article about the fury online about this that was linking to my tweets. So
I will say that I used to prefer Bird scooters. When I scooted regularly, I did angle for Birds, although that was largely because they were the most available, and I liked that they had a smaller scale scooter that made me feel a little less terrified wheeling through the streets. However, there are all of these other brand options.
In full disclosure, I like Bird the best because I've taken advantage of a free promos thing for a long time.
But all right. So you're basically like Steven Crowder, wanting the public to be outraged on your behalf when you have nothing but goodness.
I wish I had
a
a recorder to play from Home Alone like he did. All right, let's get into the actual news of the day. What's going on?
All right. Well, according to a financial disclosure filed with the House of Representatives, Paul Pelosi, husband of former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, sold 30,000 shares of Google stock a month prior to the Department of Justice's announcement of an antitrust lawsuit against the tech giant. This is according to Fox News. Here is former Congresswoman and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard on the matter.
These people think that they are special, that they are superior, and that they deserve special treatment that no one else gets. And the sad part, Jesse, is they actually do get this special treatment.
Of course they do.
They actually do get away with this
They would
crap.
never get away with this in the private sector.
This comes after Republican Senator Josh Hawley reintroduced his bill to ban stock trading in Congress, but this time he called it the Pelosi Act, preventing elected leaders from owning securities and investments, which would prohibit members of Congress and their spouses from holding or trading individual stocks and would require members found in violation to return their earnings to the American taxpayer.
Yeah, I can't get over how good that is and how politically smart that is.
Because he worked it out like it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then it condenses well to Pelosi.
100%.
Acronym.
And look, from a political perspective, you know, this is not a cheap shot. There are cheap shots that are thrown around on both sides of the aisle. I mean, I think we're all living out the ridiculousness of pretending that these confidential documents that have been found at it seems everybody's house are the big red herring that Democrats tried to make them out to be when it was just Donald Trump. You know, there are times when people try to dig in and score political points over things that are ultimately just mistakes, and it's boring. This one, Nancy Pelosi, I gotta say, is really the poster child, has really made herself the poster child for insider trading. She has pushed back at every point at which her own party or the other party try to hold her accountable and say we need to pass legislation to try to ban this practice, which is not popular, which the American people don't want them to have access to do, which obviously undermines democracy and creates a conflict of interest between the people who are supposed to be looking out for us and their stock portfolios. And she deserves this. And, you know, the acronym is fantastic.
I'm glad you brought up the documents thing again. I finally heard someone, and of course it was Mark Levin on Fox News, articulate what I've been thinking. I saw him on Hannity's show last night, and he said, look, it's transparent that this was an attempt to get Trump, but now we know that, like, everyone, like so many political figures in both parties, this is only the ones we know about. He raised the point, what do you imagine that there are senators who you know sat in Intel meetings who have documents in their imagine Dianne Feinstein's garage. How many documents she's perhaps misplaced in there, or people like. But what I'm saying and what he was saying is that it's not really. It's clear this is an easy mistake to make, and no one has alleged that this is very serious national security documents. But everybody just pretended that this was the gravest insult to the Republic because it was Donald Trump. And they were out to get Donald Trump. And I think that's fair. I think that's very true.
I think it's completely fair. Like where Democrats were on stronger ground was arguing that Donald Trump was unique insofar as that he wouldn't just give them back. That was his great transgression, not giving them back when asked. And that is meaningful. They were trying to get those documents back from him for the better part of a year. He was obstinate, and that's why Donald Trump got the raid and everybody else just complied. However, they got well over their skis and started talking about how you shouldn't be president of the United States. No one deserves to be president of the United States if you're as irresponsible as Trump was with these documents. And now we're living in this upside down world where we're all supposed to pretend that didn't happen. But the Pelosi Act is different. Pelosi deserves criticism for every letter of that acronym. That matches up so nicely.
She fought this. She fought this tooth and nail. She was so against attempts to limit members of Congress, political figures, government members from participating in the stock trade. She tried to use the language of, well, we're free market to justify it, which doesn't make any sense. And even though this is something that the American people would obviously love, would obviously support, and because time and time again, we've seen that political figures prioritize their stock interest, that when they find out things about COVID, there were 2 Republican senators who got in trouble for this, finding out about COVID or anything, their first call is to their stockbroker or to their family member who's coordinating with the stockbroker to get around some technical loophole type situation. I mean, it's and then Pelosi, as I pointed out when we talked about this a while ago, it's hilarious. She has stock in Facebook, which she has railed against as this great historic evil. And Mark Zuckerberg is personally responsible for the rise of Donald Trump and thus the rise of fascism.
Yeah, the tech company stuff. I mean, we obviously opened this read talking about her selling these Google shares. Given the enormous implications from a speech perspective and from an antitrust perspective of what's going on with these tech companies, it's incredible that she would wantonly sell these shares around significant congressional happenings and not think that this was going to come down her. And frankly, and I talk about this a little bit at my radar later today in the show, the fact that they continue to do stuff like this speaks to how much impunity Congress members have because we don't have accountability in this country. They never pay at the ballot box for the things they do when they're in office.
Well, here's what Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz had to say about the Pelosi Stock Trading Act on Tim Pool's podcast. Let's listen.
About, big tech bills and potentially breaking up Facebook. And just imagine if you're about to even vote on that, and then you go and get put options on Facebook.
That's not a hypothetical. That happened. I mean, we had bills that were moving through the Judiciary Committee that passed out of the Judiciary Committee that broke up big tech, and we were all getting ready for them to come to the floor. And on the dip, Paul Pelosi bought a bunch of those stocks.
Wow.
And then guess what? Guess what, Tim? They never fucking came to the floor.
Wow.
What a surprise.
Now, these people are evil.
What?
Man.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, that is an accurate fact pattern there. Draw whatever conclusions you want. And we talked about yesterday, even outside the government, how this can affect policy. We talked about Bill Gates changing attitudes or outlook for various COVID vaccines, et cetera, and how that might have followed his stock selling pattern. And at the very least, American people should know about it.
Yes.
They should know about it when they're deciding who they should elect to represent us and what policies they think those people are going to put in place and whether those policies are serving their interests or corporate interests or their own interests.
Yes. And look, I know that the provocative name of this legislation might scare some of the even more progressive members of the Democratic Party who have articulated a growing affinity for Mama Bear. However, it would be an enormous mistake for the left to let the right lead on this, as it has been leading in so many other issues that used to be core concerns of the left. That's not to say I think that there is a substantial or superior or more good faith interest in these things on the right than the left. But right now, at the end of the day, I mean, despite the left obviously having put forward legislation like this in the past and Nancy Pelosi killing it, I think it would be a really powerful moment if progressives were willing to stand behind a bill as adversarial as something that was called the Pelosi Act and demonstrate that they're willing to fight for principle more than just party leadership.
Here's a question. I wonder what the ratio is for how many stories there are, articles there are about the Pelosi Act in the mainstream media on CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post versus stories about the life of George Santos. What do you think the ratio is?
Oh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think it's completely true. I have a hard time. Look, the Santos story is fun. The Santos story is funny.
It's funny, absolutely.
But it's not. I mean, I was listening
Can't
to
avoid it. We haven't avoided it entirely. We don't. It's not our whole show. We don't spend every day talking about it over and over again, even though it is hilarious.
But honestly, his lies are so much less significant than the average lie that comes out of Congress. I have a hard time getting myself worked up over it. People are like, oh, how are we going to get Santos out of Congress? What are the mechanisms that can get him out of his seat? I mean, if this is what we're doing, if we're trying to get people out of Congress for lying, I got a long list of names that don't start with George or end with Santos.
Yeah. 100%. Well, speaking though of Paul Pelosi news, I did see on Twitter that apparently a judge has ordered the release of the footage of the attack. So looking forward to seeing that, and I hope that will, put to rest some of what I thought were just grossly inaccurate mischaracterizations of what we very much. It was an attack on him, but maybe this will. If people still haven't made up their mind about that, or still for some reason think the reporting was not
Accurate,
enough to show, that will clear that up.
All right. Well, stay tuned. More Rising right after this.